without further ado, let's welcome Antonio Silveira, who is the CTO of Nextdoor. Antonio started his life and career in Brazil. He moved to the US about 15 years ago. He's worn many, many hats, from development manager, director, VP, now CTO. He's been working at GoDaddy, Yahoo, and now Nextdoor. We'll be discussing about drive change with velocity, cultivating a dynamic culture of rapid decision-making and stronger execution. I'm sure this is a topic that many of you are trying to learn and are trying to get better at. So I'm really excited to bring Antonio stage. Antonio, welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Kwang. Thank you so much for getting us here together. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever you're joining us from. It is great to be here. I've been working with Kwang and the Plato team, and it's such a great initiative. I'm looking forward for the event later this year. Really incredible caliber of leaders and engineers joining the event, and looking forward to be part of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about velocity and change, and a few of the things that we've been doing, that I've been doing throughout my career, and now applying that more specifically at Nextdoor, building the engineering team and the product that we have. So I'm going to start sharing my screen real quick. And we're going to start, just to set some context. So here you can see, I hope you can see my screen. And I'm going to set some context, which is important for the learnings that I'm going to share with you, which is the business category that your company is working on, the products you're building. They have a major influence on the foundational culture of the company, but they also have a massive influence on the technical culture of the company. And I'm going to explain a little more. It's going to be simplistic at first, but it's important to set the context. I will simplify things, just saying that, one side you have SaaS, businesses and products, where you offer a product that your customers pay a given subscription for it, a given price that renews every month, renews every quarter or every year. And if you do a good job and you solve something for your customers, they continue to pay you, and you have an opportunity to then continue to increase your offering and get better products for your customers. On the other side, you have consumer products, right? So like large consumer products. And usually they offer something for free, right? So they solve something for a very large audience. And the way you monetize and you build a business is through advertising, through digital advertising. And in digital advertising, it's a real-time business. And what I mean by that is, when you open Nextdoor and you go into a feed, if the feed doesn't load, we lost all those impressions forever, right? So all the ad impressions that are showing there, we lost those impressions forever. So every time you scroll and it takes more than 1 second for us to render an ad or to get the right targeting, we lost that impression forever. There's no way for us to recover that. So in a digital ads business, I always say that it's a real-time business, a real-time engineering business. But you also have that in the subscription side. Payments, you cannot fail, right? So you can absolutely not fail with payments. So it's also a real-time business. And that is, in that environment, is incredibly critical that you have a high velocity culture. And for you to be able to do that, you need to have high flexibility across the board, right? So, but it always starts with the individual. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then it scales up into your team, into your organizations, into the company. It's very hard for you to just be tops down. It needs to start from your ICs, from the managers, from the teams, and then it bubbles up to the company. So I'm going to talk about 3 areas in that, and I'm going to choose a few topics in each one of them. In each one of them, Kwang could possibly have an entire conference just about each one of those parts. But I'm going to just take a peek on each one of those. in this specific application to Nextdoor in a digital high scale consumer product and business. So it always starts with people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those three topics. Starting with people, we always say that it always starts at recruiting. So who do you bring to your company? Who do you keep in your company? How is the growth in the company? And we always focus on optimizing for hiring for the company and not for a given team or a given organization. This is important. And there are several things that we focus on on the interview process is to detect the signals on flexibility. So engineers these days, they should absolutely be incredibly flexible to work on different tech stacks, different domains, and to be quick learners. So we always focus on that, because if you have an inflexible team, they only want to work on Java, they only want to work on Python, it's going to be very hard for your company to be agile and to adapt. Also, it's incredibly important to push, I'm going to talk more about that later, to push the decisions to the edge of your organization. So the teams, the ICs need to make as many decisions as possible at the edge of the organization. And for that, you need to empower them to move fast. One example of that sets the tone of the company is, for example, for you to make a change in production in your first week at the company. Right? So whatever you do, you commit code, and that will go to production in the first week. The other thing is you won't go. And why is that important? Because if it takes a quarter for your change to go to production, that's going to be the mindset. Oh, it's okay to take a quarter or 2 quarters to do something, to have an impact for your customers. And that creates a mindset of slowness. And just, of course, it depends on every company, but that's very key for Nextdoor. The other thing is to set up a very strong calibration process. As you're growing, and there was a circle there on Plato about, growing startups, high growth startups. As you're growing, you're hiring people for several different companies that bring their own culture with them. So then you need to set up, okay, what is the bar here for my company, for Nextdoor? And calibration, a very strong calibration process helps to create a shared understanding what great looks like, what mediocre looks like. So it's a great way for you to actually, through the work of your team, to actually define together as an organization what is that bar for performance. The other thing that is incredibly important is to have a feedback culture, very strong feedback culture. So being able to give feedback, to your peers, to your partners, to your managers, is incredibly important. Of course, it needs to be constructive, and it builds trust over time in a way that, trust is incredibly important for you to be able to make changes quickly. The opposite of that is when you have too much escalations. And that's super slow. You need to escalate. You then need to give context for everyone. It becomes incredibly political. And once it becomes political, you have mistrust. And with mistrust, you don't give feedback. So it's a very, strong negative loop. The third thing on the people side that we always say at Nextdoor is move everyone to green. And what do I mean by that is a product team is much more than just the engineers in that team. You can have an incredibly great, talented engineering team. If the product manager is not good, that entire team is going to be suboptimal. So we always look across the board on all teams, and we try to get that team to the best possible configuration. And in some cases, it's just a domain, a PM or a designer is not great working on growth projects. And then we move them to another area. They will thrive there. And sometimes it's not a fit. So we need to then, make a change. But the important thing here that I'm showing here is to visualize your team, right? So sometimes you don't see that, one spot in your team is not working well. But it's once you put everything in front of you, then you can act on it and you can fix it. So visualize your team, move everyone to be great. I think it's incredibly important for you to have an agile team. All our green teams can just work on anything. They can adapt, they can move fast. So this is a very important part of Nextdoor's principles. A little bit about process. I'm going to talk about, some of those things. Some of them, we're going to have just a slide. I'm not going to talk a lot about them, and you can ask questions about it. But optimize for learning is a very important cultural aspect for our team at Nextdoor. When we build products, especially in a fast-paced industry, we will make a lot of mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from it. The product ideas also don't always work, right? So we have the right hypothesis. When you build it, it doesn't result in what you expected. The important thing is that you share the learnings with the organization so everyone can learn and then iterate. It's important to have a culture of zero blaming. And what I mean by that is, if you make a mistake and then you have some blaming or finger pointing, what will happen is people will stop taking risks. And I always say that if you start blaming, you stop learning. The important thing is that you have a process for you to you make a mistake, you learn from it, you fix, you add the monitoring alarms, and then you share the learning and you keep that cycle. We use a process called the SEV, the site event process, weekly. It's a meeting that happens every week. It's open to everyone, where we share, what happened, the biggest sites events, the issues that we had, what we've done, what we're going to do to fix it, what we learned, and then we share that with everyone in the company. The other thing that I think it's important and crucial for you to be able to be fast at making change and adapting is to push the decision-making to the edges of the organization. What I mean by that is pushing that to the teams that are executing. And for that, you need to make sure that you're hiring for the company, you're optimizing and prioritizing what's the best for your user and for the company, and not for my little team here, my little team there. So align with the company purpose and strategy. I highly recommend to define very clear engineering principles. That's how you scale decision-making. That's how you scale how we build software, how we make technical decisions, where we compromise, where we don't compromise ever. And then one thing that, on the No Rules book from Netflix, it's important for you to push as much of the data that team needs and the context that they need so they can make as many informed decisions as possible. The last thing, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. We all know you need to have a solid CI/CD implementation. You need to have your PR to production as fast as possible. And for mobile apps, Nextdoor is 85% of our users use Nextdoor on iOS or Android. The release is different. So for that, it's important for you to we release weekly, so it's important for you to have a very strong internal testing so you can have the feedback loop as fast as possible. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The last thing is, how do you make that easy? Right? So on the internal testing, just enabling your feature for internal users is not enough. You need to make it super easy for them to provide feedback. At Nextdoor, we say that, shake it to provide feedback. So if you shake the phone and you're an employee, we actually show you a custom feedback sheet. You can select the team. Right? So is this an ads issue? Is this a feed issue? And then, that will capture the screenshots. You can add context, and they will notify that team about the feedback. And then we have follow-throughs on the feedback. Very important to make it easy to contribute to the product. Then talking a little bit about data and tools, monitor everything, track everything. Right? So I hope that this is a good practice for you to actually define on the definition of done of your sprints and your features, monitoring alarms. Right? So you absolutely need to have that, because if you don't have monitoring, you don't know what's broken, and you cannot track the trends over time. It's also important for you to understand your business, right? So what is the product you're building? What is the business model? And for you to visualize that flow, right? So at least the critical flows, the flows that should never break. And use your tool, right? So Kwang mentioned one of the circles with a Datadog leader. We use Datadog, we love Datadog, and we use their anomaly detection quite often because depending on the amount of data, the human eye cannot catch nuances and trends, but the tool can. So we extensively use anomaly detection on our monitoring tools. I apologize for the size, but this is an example of what do I mean by a real-time business. In a social platform business, in an advertising business, you have the flow. So there are three things here on the screen. On the y-axis, you have the time. So it starts at midnight, 1 a.m., and it goes up to 11 p.m. So hourly. We call this report the hourlies. And in there, you see, the flows. So it starts with notifications. If you get a notification and it's relevant and personalized, you open the app, that's activity starts. Then you see the posts. Then you react or you comment or you create a post. So this flow is very important to us. And then we have, on the line below, you have the absolute number. What is the number now at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 5 p.m.? And what is that number compared to the 5 p.m. a week ago? So then we have historical context, if there's any seasonality there. And then, you're going to see the colors is blurred because I cannot share, the specific numbers. But the color is, we use Datadog to show, the trend and the change. Light green is 20% up to 20% up. And light red is 10% down. Dark green is up to 50% up. And dark red is up to 20% down. So every time we see those things in the trends in the absolute and week over week, our teams are on top of it, right? So they know that in their hourly what's happening, right? So did we see any trend? Is there any impact in account creations or in ads impressions? So it's incredibly important for us to be on top of that at least at hourly cadence. But a lot of those teams are actually real time with the anomaly detection. The other thing is we're a native app company. And native apps have an interesting release cycle, right? So you release a version, and then you need to take adoption of that version, right? So not all users install on the same day. So it takes time for you to take adoption. So you always have multiple versions of your app in production. And it's important for us to see ecosystem impacts, right? So you release something, you don't see at 1% rollout or 10% rollout that you broke anything. And in between app releases, if there is any ecosystem impact. On the lines, you can see that we track content views, app impressions, ad impressions, crash-free sessions. This list is very extensive. And we track that week over week, over month, so we understand what's happening. And the trends, and then we act on them. There are two circles here. One of them, for example, we released an app that it was crashing when you actually got a notification. So our cache-free sessions actually decrease. So we right away stopped the release, the rollout, fixed it, and started a new release version. The other thing is with apps that is important is it's a very slow process. The App Store especially is very slow. So an emergency release, we found something very, very bad. It takes hours for Apple to approve that emergency release. So and that can be, you basically lose that day, the revenue for that day if that happens. What we've tried to do is how can we anticipate that at the minimum rollout possible? So we use anomaly detection there to actually detect something at 1% release. So we can stop at 1% rollout, and then we can address that. And then before we actually implemented this, sometimes it would take a week for us to see the large impact as the app gets more adoption. So that was critical for us to using machine learning in that sense. The last thing, not going to talk a lot about it. I hope you all using feature flags and feature configs. All our features most of them use feature configs and feature flags. This is important because it can turn on and off quickly, any feature. You don't need a release of an app. And I think, this is incredibly important that you have that agility, because then again, you can take risks, you can build things faster because it's quick for you to react. And that was it. So I hope that, it was very rushed, but, we can answer some more questions and go deeper with Kwang on the Q&A from you all. Back
so much,
to you,
Antonio.
Kwang.
Thanks so much, Antonio. We have time for questions, a bit less than 20 minutes. Please go in the Q&A tab on the bottom, and please make sure to vote for the questions you want me to ask to Antonio. So I will try to respect your democratic vote. So let's see. Thanks for the class, Antonio. Do this concept still apply if you're not in an ad-based model, but still need to be dynamic and highly adaptable?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, this is incredibly important. Agility, it doesn't matter if you're in a subscription business, in a traditional SaaS business, or advertising. The difference is just that, with a subscription business, usually you have more time to react, right? So, and you have more tools. You can give discounts, or you can just, do something to retain that customer. But absolutely, right? So at GoDaddy, when I worked with Daddy, providing services for small businesses, we did have very high agility and moving fast with our releases. But you have other tools in a SaaS business for you to retain your customers, for you to not break the trust with them. But absolutely.
Awesome. So it's those principles apply obviously to other discipline, but it's even more critical in ad-based because it's dynamic, but it applies everywhere. Let's dive into one of them. One of the things you said is feedback is very important, and people giving and receiving feedback is so important. What did you do to actually help people get better at giving and receiving feedback? It's not something easy to do. So what did you do at Nextdoor?
So the feedback, creating a strong culture of feedback is a journey. So I would say that there's a lot for us to do at Nextdoor, but it starts at the top. Right? So that's one of the principles that need to come from the leadership, the CEO, myself, my leaders, and goes on. I think, the easiest way is for you to share the feedback publicly. Right? So as a leader, you receive feedback, and then, you share that publicly with everyone. Hey, I got this great feedback. And it's important that it's not anonymous, right? So because then you reinforce that it's okay for you to give feedback. So I always receive great feedback, and I usually share that publicly. I share, hey, I get this great feedback from this engineer, and yeah, I'm gonna try to address those things. And as a culture, or we need to fix this. So I think, setting the example that it's okay to give feedback and you act on them and follow through on them, I think is important. There are also several tools for you to do that. There's a lot of literature. If you ask ChatGPT, it's pretty good at giving you examples of candid feedback about any topic. It doesn't hallucinate too much. But yeah, I think, setting the example as a leader, being open. And we mess it up. So just share when you mess it up, when someone gives a feedback. I would say that's something I would do.
Do you have any specific process or tool or training that you would recommend?
So I don't think that there is necessarily a tool. We use small improvements for reviews, but for feedback, there's nothing better than face-to-face. Mm-hmm. Right. So just have a quick one-on-one, share the feedback. It's important for you to, if you're receiving feedback, to actively listen, to take the feedback, and not challenge it. Because if you challenge it all the time, no one's going to give you feedback anymore. Right. So what you can do is internalize and then say, I understand why you're giving me the feedback, but given this, I'm going to act on it, or, I receive and unfortunately, we can't fix this, or we're not going to address this right now. It's important that you have that, but it's important that you actively listen to the feedback. In terms of tool, we do something that is super quick, which is we call a feedback loop. So everyone sits in a room, and then we do like a round robin. Everyone goes 5 minutes giving feedback, 5 minutes receiving feedback. And then you do that super quick with everyone on the team. And then at the end, everyone shares the positive, the constructive feedback, and the feedback on what they need to do better. And it creates an openness of everyone has stuff to do to improve, and everyone has great things that they already do.
Yeah, I love this really practical example. It also answers one of the questions, which was, what are the key to removing friction for soliciting feedback for continuous improvement loop? That was one of the questions I think you actually answered.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
one.
This is one of the tools that's super efficient in terms of time, right? So you can get an entire team to quickly give and receive feedback and then share that with everyone. So you create openness.
Thank you. The next one is a rather general one, but it's the most voted, so let's go through it. Do you have examples of other areas like design, product, not aligning with this principle, and what you did to get alignments? Because engineering is not working in a vacuum. You have to work with other disciplines too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So there's always that. Right. So I think that, in some cases, with all of them, with the business analyst, the data science, sometimes you don't have that team performing really well. And it's important for you to visualize that. I think, the biggest difference in style, I would say, is growth related projects, and then just, general development projects. Also, pure platform projects are simpler because they're more engineering driven. So you don't have a lot of those functions. You don't have a designer on the platform team necessarily. But yes, we had situations where, for example, a designer is a great designer, but the pace of growth development is different. And they didn't do well, and they were in the red. So when we look at the team, the designer is on the red. So we just moved that designer to another domain, an engagement, product, and they thrived. And then we hire someone that has, that drive, that grit of fast iteration. That's important for a growth project.
Yeah, I got it. One of the related question is to coordinate multiple departments, multiple teams. And the specific question is, how do you manage, organize, and coordinate projects across multiple teams and departments? Do you have specialized people like TPM to do that? Or if not, how you do that?
We don't have a lot of TPM.
Okay.
A lot of the project management really happens with the engineering leader, the engineering manager, and the product manager at Nextdoor. We try to be very clear on the initiatives we're working on, right? So those are the initiatives. And for each initiative, for example, growth, it's a general initiative. There are several teams working on that. Registration and login, making that as efficient as possible. So we align through initiatives and clear communication and strategy. And then, the dependencies, we try to keep that lane as independent as possible. And we have a culture where you don't open a ticket to someone else, you just go there and change the code, right? So we are a non-ticket culture. I think that makes you slow. If you need to open a ticket to someone else, they need to prioritize something on their backlog. It's going to take forever. If you need to change, align with the PM and engineer and just go there and change the code on that area if you need that. But yeah, we don't have a lot of TPMs in Nextdoor. I think that at our size now, we definitely need a little more.
It's the second time I hear this in 2 days. I was talking with VP of product at Ramp, and he was saying the same thing. They don't have a system of tickets to just fix things. It seems good to be true, but it seems incredible to be able to do that. And of course, in a small startup, it's way easier to do that. But at your scale, it's incredible to be able to.
Yeah, it's a very strong cultural aspect, right? So if you start to have a ticket-based culture, then you kind of throw the problem somewhere else. And then you have other issues in that sense, right? So
it's fascinating. We had a discussion in stand-up this morning about exactly this. So I'm going to leave this question for the end, but there's a question I really like about technical debt, and all of this velocity is creating technical debt. So how are you balancing addressing technical debt along with the need to move at the pace of Nextdoor?
Yeah, it's a forever problem.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a forever problem. I think the important thing again is to have a very strong engineering culture and principles where you understand where you're optimizing for. I think that everything that goes to production becomes that instantly. And then you need to make sure that you continue to really monitor. I think the other thing is understanding the core of the technical debt and creating space over time for you to fix the technical debt and address them, because it gets to a certain threshold. If you're optimizing for velocity, that your technical debt is going to make you incredibly exponentially slower, because now your system is too brittle. You have too much, too many fragile areas. You cannot touch several things. And what that generates is, oh, let's build the new one. The new one is going to be better. This one is old and it has a lot of issues. So that's the fallacy of the new platform, of the new product. It's better for you to continue to refactor and rebuild your thing continuously than to end on an endless tech debt that you need to basically kill that whole area and build a new one. It's hard. I don't think that there's an answer. I think this is a forever problem.
No, I guess it can be a whole conference about it, and we would not
Exactly.
either. That could be actually a really. By the way, Antonio is going to be a speaker at Elevate too, and we still have to figure out the topic, and that could be actually a topic. Can you please share some insight of the calibration process that you mentioned about engineering team, specifically when you have people from different backgrounds and responsibilities? So that could be a topic, how we do performance calibration at Nextdoor. But what's your 2-minute answer, and then we can follow up after.
Yeah, I think calibration is very important though. It's incredibly time consuming. I don't know any good calibration that doesn't take a lot of time. But the good thing is that you focus on the work and the impact of their work. We always have a recency bias, right? So who are that engineer that I talked last week or that I talked yesterday? As you grow, it's very hard for you to have that exposure to everyone. So you kind of have a recency bias. So the calibration focus on the work removes that. You talk about the work, you look at the code, you look at the things that were delivered, you look at how they work together. So working together is incredibly important. And when you look at the work and then you actually cluster the performance, and then you say, hey, this engineer works at the same pace and this level of craftsmanship as this other engineer, and then you cluster them, then you start to see what great looks like. And that's what we need to drive everyone towards. But yeah, we have it's a very structured process now at Nextdoor. We just finished, this week is the second week of calibration, is the last one. And we take that very seriously, right? So they're really, and as you discuss each case, everyone listens and everyone has a shared understanding of what a great performance is, what underperforming mediocrity is, and that you take action about this, right? So, or you help with coaching, or it's the domain area that, unfortunately, the engineer is not great at this. We can move them to another area. But yeah, I absolutely think that as you grow, it's important for you to have a very strong calibration process.
We can have a full talk about this, Antonio. And what I've heard from many other engineering team, it does take a lot of time. There's no shortcut. Need to spend the time, and transparency is also a key feature for make it.
Yeah, and one important thing that people sometimes confuse, because they feel like you're going to stack rank people. It should not be about stack ranking people. It's just how you align performance, and you cluster people that are performing at the same level. It's not about 20% here, 10% there, and so on. So when you talk about the work, you kind of remove this notion of stack ranking.
Yeah. A more personal questions. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So a more personal question: how do you embrace yourself work-life balance? If yes, how do you help your employee avoiding burnout? A related questions from Rajesh is, what does your typical day look like?
Yeah, and this is a long answer though. I don't know if I can answer that quickly. One thing that I like is, we in a growing company, there's always fires everywhere. It's important that you take some time for yourself, whatever that is. If it's sports, if it's, in my case, it's cycling. I like to ride my bike. is a moment that I have for myself. I'm the only one in the road. So that's my therapy is riding my bike here in the Bay Area. The burnout is tough, right? So I think the velocity doesn't mean that. I think you need to understand the velocity is a vector, right? So is reference to where you are, how, what is your change rate over time, and it needs to be sustainable, right? So if you have the notion of the death marches, and in a smaller company, you're still figuring it out to your product market fit. Sometimes you need more of that intensity, but you also as a leader need to figure out, okay, where is the balance of trying to not burn everyone out. I think it's unequal through the organization. Some teams are under more pressure and they feel more of that. But it's important that we rebalance as much as possible, and everyone takes their vacations, everyone takes their time to re-energize and have time for that. In the end, for me, the principle is if you are committed, you're focused, and you're delivering, you're aligned with your team, you can work in whatever hours makes sense for you. You can take the time to walk your dog. The important thing is that team is cohesive and they understand how that works. But yeah, it's a continuous thing, especially here in the Valley in our industry, that you don't confuse velocity with just death marches, and then everyone becomes slow and the morale goes down, which is incredibly hard to monitor over time. But you feel, so when you look at the team, you know that that's happening.
Awesome. We are wrapping up this episode.